we're capped on Bitcoin at 21 million. At the same time, it is very, very difficult to build more land. You can build more houses, but there's only a finite amount of land out there that you can own. And I guess the question becomes, do you think that the central banks and our government are going to continue to devalue the dollar, right? If the money printer goes on, look at assets. Assets are king, whether it be Bitcoin, real estate. Look at what's happening with gold and silver right now. It's incredible. And I don't see a scenario where that stops. So getting into, diversification, if you want to call it, equity and property, makes sense.
Bitcoin is a currency on the internet.
If you don't trust any other currency, this is where you go.
It's going to outperform everything.
Bitcoin could eventually be worthless.
Every day is a good day to buy Bitcoin.
Bitcoin reached its highest price to date.
Bitcoin hitting a new high. It really has reached escape velocity.
There is no second best.
Who cares about Bitcoin?
It's the only secure database that's ever been invented.
Antisocial.
Bitcoin is the real deal.
Stupid.
Everything is bullish for Bitcoin.
Immoral.
It's going up forever, Laura.
Fix the money, fix the world.
WaterWork is a registered investment advisor, and the opinions expressed on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Basilica LLC. Joining this is a CPA, and the opinions expressed on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Trusted CPA or other affiliated firms. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and unless otherwise stated are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as a recommendation appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice.
Welcome to Bitcoin for Financial Services Media, the podcast where sound money meets professional services. We explore how to build the financial service industry within the principles, values, and ethos of Bitcoin. Today, we're joined by Greg Ranz, Senior Loan Officer at Revolution Mortgage, and we'll be discussing how they're integrating Bitcoin into their business. Let's get started. Welcome back to Bitcoin for Financial Services. Jordan, I'm stoked about today's episode. We're joined by Greg Ranz, Senior Loan Officer at Revolution Mortgage, Bitcoin for Financial Services Summit, veteran and sponsor. Pleasure to have you, Greg.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be here.
Good to see you, Greg. This is fun. I think this is one of those topics that so many people have been, dreaming about and talking about over the course of the last, at least the last 5 years. And you all just took the idea and you said, hey, you can just do things. We're going to go out and create this product and take it to market. And you guys have had some really cool announcements in the last several weeks. So I don't know, maybe kick us off for anyone that doesn't know the name Greg Ranz, they're about to know, and tell us, what can they do with their Bitcoin in terms, you can't live in your Bitcoin. I guess we should start there, right? Or can you?
Good point. No, you cannot.
Okay. So if someone has Bitcoin, but they're also looking to put a roof over their head, I guess that's kind of the big theme here, right? And generally there's been, do you sell your Bitcoin to put a down payment? You guys thought, hey, there's a better solution here, right?
Yeah, historically, title companies and the government would require you to liquidate those assets in order to then put that down for a transaction for residential real estate. With Revolution Mortgage, we have some private investors on our non-QM side, so our non-qualified mortgage side, that are allowing us to utilize Bitcoin stacks as an asset utilization model, where you don't have to liquidate those assets. So if you're familiar with the mortgage process, a lot of it has to do with your credit score, the amount of debt you hold, and the income associated with that debt. It's called DTI, debt to income ratio. And that sort of designates whether or not you're qualified for a mortgage. Now, we can take those Bitcoin assets, utilize that, amortize it over 120 months, and use that towards income qualification. So a lot of Bitcoiners who have massive stacks of Bitcoin but don't have reliable income can now be in the market to being qualified for a mortgage, which is the significant change in our industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even I'm sure Wyatt has seen this in his experience. As I read through your all's press release, even just for people who are small business owners and don't and maybe they're in their first year or the first year, year and a half, and they haven't hit that 2 year of tax returns with the business activity on there. I mean, getting a mortgage, I've known people literally who go out and get a W-2 job just so they can get approved for a mortgage. And then I won't name names, but then they quit the job just so that they could, but they have a successful business. So all that to say, when I was reading through the press release, I was like, this is really powerful for normies as well as Bitcoiners.
100%. And yeah, just a pro tip, if you're going that route, do not quit your job until you've signed all the closing documents, because they will find out. And believe it or not, we've had people quit their jobs right before closing, or go take out a massive loan to buy a truck, and it will kill your closing if you're not careful.
Talk about a bummer. Yeah, it's such a good point, Jordan, because even before I was really into Bitcoin, I was into, startup land and startup Twitter. And I have this tweet burned into my memory. It was this guy, he just sold his business, not like a massive exit, but he was sitting on like $5 million of cash in his bank account. He's like, yep, still can't get a mortgage because I was like self-employed, even though I could buy my house in cash. That's just crazy to me, and I'm excited like the route you guys are taking, Greg, because to me, this is one of the easiest ways to make fun of banks. Like, they're so black and white. They can't think outside the box at all. And it's just like this tunnel vision. Like, are you W-2 MPC? If you're not a W-2 MPC, I don't want to talk to you. And that's why I give you guys a ton of props, for thinking outside the box. And to me, honestly, what you guys are doing, this is the reason Jordan and I started the podcast, to highlight stories like this, because it's just so full circle on, you saw an issue in the market, you saw an addressable market, and you went out and you built a solution for it.
100%. Yeah. And we're, also focusing on the education piece, right? Because equity is, it's an investment in your future, right? And people don't understand how you can leverage equity in the future. But essentially, if you're renting, you're paying someone else's mortgage, right? So we talk a lot about the cost of waiting. And if you look at the 2019 median home price at $322,000 and compare it with the 2025 price of $417,000, that's $95,000 right there. It takes 6 years of rent at, and I don't know anyone who holds a rent charge of $2,000, but that's another $144K. So over a 6-year period, you're talking about almost $250,000 lost in 6 years, $40,000, where you could be building that equity and then leveraging that in the future, as opposed to paying someone else's mortgage.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, let's back up just a little bit. I want everyone to make sure that they get a good grasp of just your history. How did you get into the mortgage business, and then also speak to how did you get into the Bitcoin, community? Just kind of paint that picture, and also just so everyone knows, I think you guys are based out of Denver, right?
Correct. Well,
Okay,
so
perfect.
the headquarters, for a little bit about Revolution Mortgage first, we did about $4 billion in lending last year. They're headquartered in Ohio. We've got branches all over the nation. We can do loans in 48 states. We do not do New York and Hawaii. We've got over 500 employees. A little bit about my background. I came from the tech industry. I was in all sorts of different kinds of tech, everything from video games to public safety software to advertising tech. But that was the W-2 situation, and got a little tiring for me at a certain point. So at the end of last year, I made the call to quit and find something new, right? I've got 2 little girls that I want to spend time with. I wasn't spending time with them, working 16-hour days in front of my computer. and made the switch. So I've been in the mortgage industry for about 8 months now. So still very new, but understand it. I've done buy, sell, refinance transactions myself. Got into Bitcoin in 2018. Had the cliche experience of buying the top at 8,000 and then watching it crash a week later to 2,000 and sort of getting frustrated and coming back to it a year or two later and then putting in the work and understanding what it was and really going all in on it. So I love running nodes and do home mining and heat reuse, things like that. And the mortgage world is sort of self-fulfilling, right? You control your own destiny. You're getting paid as you close deals, that sort of thing. But give me a little bit more control over how hard I want to work and set my own destiny. So it was awesome getting into my branch in Inglewood and starting to slowly orange pill these guys and asking them immediately about Bitcoin. Hey, what about this? And even hitting a few unfortunate hurdles with some deals where we do tax return loans, right? Where you have income that is disclosed, even if they are Bitcoin transactions, on your tax documentation. I had a couple guys come in and they had a 2-year history of selling Bitcoin, having those tax returns, and disclosing those as income as capital gains. But that's not accepted currently. So we couldn't do that. Had to come up with some other plans, and working with our non-QM department, they were able to convince a few of our 12 investors to fund these loans and allow us to use the asset utilization model with Bitcoin, which is huge.
Your wealth deserves intention. Basilic Financial is a Bitcoin-focused wealth management firm built to help our clients find balance between money and meaning. We integrate sound money strategies across 4 distinct personalized services: financial planning, individual wealth management, retirement services for SMBs, and Bitcoin financial services. Your prosperity, your purpose, intentionally guided at Basilic Financial. Visit our website at basilic.io to schedule a free consultation. Yeah, that's awesome, Greg. And especially, just being a Bitcoiner, jumping into a new industry and immediately integrating Bitcoin into it, I think is awesome. And every pleb should be doing that. Could you walk us through some of the mechanics and some of the behind the scenes work of what it was like, pitching this to the powers that be, what they came back with, how you kind of came up with solutions to, answer any potential, concerns they had?
So quite a few things. I mean, I took it from a title company perspective first to ask them. It's funny, I was talking with my father-in-law. He's out in Illinois. He actually has a deed to a home that's still in his family that's printed on sheepskin. And it's now framed, and they've since gone digital. But believe it or not, the title requirements for residential property at the county level is it varies so widely, county to county, company to company. And there are still a tremendous amount of title companies that are still doing paper. So my initial contact with title companies was to ask them, you've done barter transactions for real estate previously, right? I have 20 cows and a tractor. I want to give my 20 cows and a tractor to a guy, and he's going to give me property. Well, talk with your lawyers and figure out how I can do that with Bitcoin. So I'm, infiltrating certain title companies to start asking these questions. But there's still a lot of glossy eyes, right? Now, from the mortgage side and the investors, there's still a lot of glossy eyes and education that needs to be had. What they are now seeing is that this is a stable asset that we can utilize. There are existing loan programs for asset utilization against, say, a 401k or a stock portfolio. It's typically referred to as an asset depletion model, where they sort of expect that you're selling some of those assets to use towards the mortgage. Now, the ratios and stuff as to how those qualify you vary. But in talking with our team was basically like, hey, we need to make this happen for Bitcoin. And they worked with all of their internal investors and found not all of them, but probably about 40% of our internal investors that fund the non-QM side of our business to get on board with this. And then it was a matter of determining the requirements and proof of ownership, that sort of thing. And they're on board, right? Because they are starting to see it as a trusted asset.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is so exciting. I mean, obviously Wyatt and I speak with clients all the time, and I guess more so a bit on Wyatt's side, but we deal with the real estate stuff if they need, tax returns. And our big bugaboo that's a joke in the tax world is asking us for the letters about about, hey, is this a legit thing or whatever. But I guess where I want to go with this question is, I love that Wyatt and I get to do these types of interviews and conversations, because I want to know how I can talk through all of this with a client. So if you're sitting across the table, from someone who's like, hey, I've got a bunch of clients who this might be very interesting to them, how would you have someone like Wyatt or myself go about, talking about this with a client and seeing if it's a good fit for them? Maybe what are some different target clients that's like, hey, this is kind of a home run, versus maybe this is something they should consider?
Yeah. So, I mean, from our perspective, we're going to take it the traditional route, right? Do an application. We're going to do a soft pull on your credit. We're going to look at your debt to income ratios. We're going to start figuring out whether or not there's existing equity you can tap into, or if this is a first time purchase. There are lots of great programs to get people in, right? And most people don't understand how the whole process works. And it's free to submit an application and understand your baseline and start getting educated as to how this works, right? So we really want to start the traditional route and try to get approved there, because you're going to get more favorable rates on a traditional qualified mortgage program. But if there are people who have concerns, we have these non-QM solutions to supplement the income and the reserves to get them qualified, right? And the way we took it initially with the Bitcoin Financial Services Summit was, what are programs that, existing Bitcoiners might want to leverage if they have equity in property, to pay off debts, to live a little bit more comfortably, to buy more Bitcoin, right? We've got DSCR loans for debt service coverage ratio for property investors, where you don't need an income if you can prove the rent on a place, put down the capital to get the ratio of the rent versus the mortgage payment around, 1. We can give you a loan to buy that investment property. There are cash out refinances, right? Where you have been paying a mortgage, you have equity built up in the home. We can refinance you, potentially get your monthly payment down and get you cash out so you can do a renovation or buy more Bitcoin or whatever, right? There are HELOC programs, home equity lines of credit, which is a variable credit rate. Reverse mortgages for people over 62 years old, right? That is a great way to tap into equity that, the older generation has built up, but they don't know they can leverage. There's a lot of people who struggle with continuing to pay that mortgage. They're living a very stressful life because they don't have the income. Well, a reverse mortgage is perfect for that, right? Get your mortgage payments down to 0, pay off your home, get a little cash, live comfortably, and that's a tax-free thing, right? So there are a bunch of different programs that we utilize, but it really depends on the situation, right?
Right. And then if you work in the Bitcoin component, I guess, into the mortgage, so you're saying, okay, we went down the traditional path. that didn't work. Now we're going to pivot and just say it's a, it's a young family. Maybe this is their first or second home purchase. They've been saving in Bitcoin. They potentially in the, a year ago, they might have had to sell that Bitcoin to put a down payment on a property. I guess
Right.
walk us through that specific example of how
Sure.
does that Bitcoin get posted as collateral on the home loan?
It's not collateral, right? That's the great thing. So we need seasoned Bitcoin funds for 60 days, and then we can utilize 65% of the fiat value of that Bitcoin divided by 120 months and use that as a monthly income towards calculation to lower that debt to income ratio, right? So it's as simple as that. We have non-custodial. So you've got your big guys, right? Your Rivers, your Unchained, your Coinbases, your Binances, your Robinhoods, which are supplying monthly statements. We would need the statements from those companies in order to prove the KYC AML perspective of it and prove that those were seasoned. But we now have requirements for a pure self-custody validation, right? Where we can meet with a borrower who's running an Umbral node and perform a Satoshi test where that gives us proof of ownership and we can use those funds towards that same calculation.
Which I think is so cool, and where I give you massive props, for being, Bitcoiner and thinking through, we mentioned this every episode in our outro, but building, financial products within the principles, values, and ethos of Bitcoin. I remember, a couple months ago, there was a bunch of hubbub on X about, whatever guy in the government was like, we're going to, make it easier for people who owe, the C word to get, mortgages, as long as you keep it on Coinbase and, it's fully custodied and all this other jazz. And it's like, thanks, I think, it's like you kind of missed the point, but here we have Greg at Revolution Mortgage solving that problem with the Satoshi test. I thought that was just so brilliant. You guys were able to do that.
And we're waiting for that first pioneer and a self-custody solution. So I'm excited. I hope we see it in 2026. There's been a tremendous response to both the leveraging existing equity GPT that we put out at the Bitcoin Financial Services Summit, and it's been great. Another thing that we're working on through the space in Denver is our solar and green program, where there are programs to get 3.5% back or up to 12K to refinance your place and add solar to it. So we're trying to figure out a Bitcoin mining component for, heating your radiant floor heats or put it in your HVAC system to heat your home. So lots of exciting, really innovative thinking coming out of that summit.
Yeah. No, and that's very helpful to understand. So you guys you're essentially modeling out if someone needed to sell their Bitcoin over a period of time to support making those mortgage payments alongside their other income. That's essentially how you guys are working that into the model when you're doing the due diligence side, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So it does. Yeah, it's super powerful. I guess I'm curious too. Obviously, I think we're all big fans of Andrew Hones and what he's up to with posting Bitcoin to collateral inside the collateral package for real estate. Is that something you all are looking into? If there's someone who's just like, I would like to just not sell this, but post it and use that to actually get maybe a little bit bigger house for my growing family, and maybe over time the interest rate is actually a bit more favorable since the collateral package is like, not tied just to the real estate itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to come down the road with education, right? We're not quite there yet. That's my personal opinion. Again, we're really just utilizing this for the income and the reserve portion of the approval process. Once you've signed and closed that loan, you can do whatever you want with the Bitcoin, right? Move it, sell it, whatever.
If you're a financial professional working with Bitcoin, you know the pain of messy CSVs, broken cost basis, and accounting tools that were never built for this asset. Bitmint fixes that. Bitmint is the Bitcoin native accounting platform built for CPAs, bookkeepers, advisors, miners, and serious Bitcoin investors. You get clean Bitcoin bank statements, reliable cost basis tracking, full reporting, and fiat integration through Plaid. No crypto talk, no workarounds, just proper accounting for the hardest money on earth. Create a free account or book a demo at bitmint.co today.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And ultimately, that's what I think Bitcoiners are after. It's like, one, recognize this asset for what it is. Two, give me the flexibility to do what I want with my money, which is what Bitcoin is. And I think this is a tremendous first step in that right direction. I'll reiterate what Jordan said. I'm super stoked about these dual collateralized assets, steal a line from Pierre Rochard, but this is how I think, we recapitalize the market in general, is integrating, Bitcoin into these different financial products. And that's how we get this peaceful transition to a Bitcoin standard. You mentioned, the summit, Greg. And I thought one of the coolest things about the summit that I've used as a case study, just talking with people, is you guys, the Revolution Mortgage team, posted up upstairs and held a workshop, and you were just talking with Bitcoiners in real life, getting their feedback about what they would want to see in the product. Tell us about some of those discussions, what Bitcoiners were looking for, and how you integrated that into this offering.
Yeah, I mean, is really just relationship building, right? Bitcoiners have lives. They all have their own stories and circumstances and desires to make changes and build in their lives. And, initially when we went in, I thought our little GPT was sort of a gimmick, but it turned out to be pretty powerful in the fact that there's an actual desire from this community to tap into the equity in their homes. Whereas outside of the community, we struggle to educate people what equity means and how they can utilize it. Whereas Bitcoiners are very financially sound in mind and understand that and are eager to leverage that equity where they have it. So a lot of really good conversations about, well, how can I invest further? How can I continue building in, other areas, not just my primary residence? And if I have this, how much can I get out? And, it's just this constant cycle of how do I continue to build?
Yeah. So what you're referencing there is just where someone's wanting to do potentially some kind of cash out refi on existing equity, and then obviously what they do with the funds post is not really, I guess you don't have to work that into the deal, but what you're seeing a lot of people, hey, I want to pull this out of my real estate, I want to push this into Bitcoin, right? That was what a lot of those conversations stem back to.
That seems to be, yes, the trending solution, whether it's a reverse mortgage or a cash out refi. We did have some interest in our investment product, the DSCR loan, where you don't need, frankly, an income, so that they can continue building, right? There are a lot of sitting money, and if it's not working for you, most people know that having debt in equity is not a bad thing, right? I mean, I explained the cost of waiting at the beginning, which is significant and it adds up over time.
Yeah. What are you all seeing? Obviously the interest rate environment today is much different than it was when a lot of people either bought or refied back in 2020, 21. I guess talk us through those conversations. If someone's sitting on an extremely low interest rate, how are you all talking through, okay, maybe we do make a switch here? What are all the trade-offs with the current rate environment?
Yeah, so I think the 2021, 2022 rates of 2% will not happen again in our lifetime, right? It didn't happen during the Great Depression. It was a very unique circumstances with COVID and the market. I don't see that coming back. With that said, I do expect rates to go down. I would love to see low fives. And with buy downs, you probably get into the high fours. And on the non-QM side, we're at the high 6s to 8 currently. But rates are down, 70 bips year over year, which is incredible, right? I would hope they continue to go down, but I think the people that are waiting for those 2% rates again, I don't see them coming.
Yeah, that's interesting. You hear about the golden handcuffs all the time. I don't feel bad for those people. I don't know why they, complain. 2% mortgage, fine, whatever. Greg, I'm curious how this has been received. Obviously, you hatched this brainchild out of the Denver branch of Revolution Mortgage. Have you guys talked to other branches? Like, what kind of internal comms do you guys have across the company? Obviously, I'm assuming you can roll this product out nationwide, but you got other offices that are hitting you up and being like, "This is genius. I can't wait to deploy it"?
Yes, so we've rolled it out, but again, there's a certain orange pilling and education that needs to happen before people are comfortable going out and trying to sell this, which is why I'm trying to lead the forefront. It's the same thing with marketing and compliance, right? This is very new territory for the mortgage industry nationwide, right? Whereas we typically only have relationships with the real estate side, realtors, and co-marketing there. Now we're talking about unique financial institutions, right? Your two companies and taxes and financial advisors and things like that, where there are partnership opportunities. But we haven't put it through the ringer on the compliance side to actually form these partnerships. So there's been a little bit of apprehension there, but I think we'll get there. It's just going to be slow.
Yeah, no, it's this is a great audience, I think, to hear about this because even anyone in a meetup, and Bitcoiners are together all the time, or at least more and more. I think there's just all kinds of fun niche events that are popping up. Like even today, I'm in Nashville for the Nashville Energy and Mining Summit, and this is more on the mining folks that get together, but there's people who meet up all over the country, all over the world, and so I'm excited to start working this into conversations. And I think to Wyatt's question, you go to a mortgage guy or gal who, life was really good if you were a mortgage person back in 21, right? I remember all of those people who are like, come do a refi or go buy this house. And, it's like that meme where they're on the phone and the money's coming in, right? That's kind of how I feel about how the mortgage industry was. And then, at least, and Greg, you could speak to this much better than I could, but I kind of heard through at least my local network of like, hey, some of those jobs went away when rates really spiked up. And so I think for those in the mortgage industry that survived that kind of downturn from how it used to be to how it was in the past several years, this is like, hey, you're opening yourself up to potentially a completely new cohort of people that want to work with you because you have this product that is cutting edge. No one else is doing this. And so it's a really interesting way, I think, to bring in new customers for people who are part of the Revolution Mortgage team nationwide.
Yeah, 100%. And, we are seeing scenarios where even with a much lower rate in, the mid threes, things like that, now that they've got 5 years worth of equity built up, they can do a refinance at a higher rate and get a lower mortgage payment. So there are those scenarios too. It really just depends on, how people are living and what their goals are. If it's, oh, my mortgage payment's brutal right now, or they got in at a 15-year mortgage at a low rate, maybe they want to change to a 30 and it could cut their monthly mortgage payment in half, right? So there are those scenarios too that we look out for.
Yeah.
Are we doing 50-year mortgages yet? Is that a thing?
I think they're coming, man. I really do.
Oh boy.
Expect them
Yeah.
to. That's going to put a lot of people in the market that are priced out at these higher rates that can't handle a 30-year mortgage payment when asset prices have gone through the roof, right? The
Yeah.
the boomers will say, well, the interest rate was at 18% when I bought my house. But if you do the numbers on a $50,000 house, 18% is no big deal. 6, 7, 8% on a $750,000 house is a huge difference. So really crunching the numbers and understanding the difference, the long-term impacts of it. But here, let me ask you this. How many people do you know who have held a 30-year mortgage for 30 years? I don't know a
Nobody.
single person, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing, is this isn't necessarily a 30-year commitment. Most people are only staying in a home for 6 years, right? The average, I think, is 6 years. And this is just a term to start building equity, right? There are always changes and refis that people can pursue to get more favorable terms down the line. But we're stressing the importance of build that equity. It's important.
Yeah. Okay, so you've mentioned education, several times. I kind of want to, obviously, we're in the business of educating either clients or folks who tune into the show. I'm curious what what the strategy for you, Greg, looks like for the mortgage company this year, in terms of, are you all going to conferences? Are you pursuing kind of like more of a medium like this that's podcast driven? Are you traveling around to some of the different offices nationwide and giving some presentations to folks internally? I'm just curious, kind of your overall strategy as well as the company's overall strategy to kind of educate people and also get the word out about this new offering.
Yeah, I mean, so from the Bitcoin asset utilization, we're sticking with social media and the podcast route for now. I'm really hopeful that we can turn a bunch of deals this year and justify coming to the Bitcoin Financial Services Summit in Denver later this year. It's also unique because the Bitcoin community is nationwide, right? I myself am only licensed in a few states, but I'm getting contacted from all over the place, right? So I'm also working with the company to figure out how do we chase these realistically, and still make it beneficial to myself if I'm going to have deals coming in from all these different states, right? Outside of that, we're sticking to the traditional route. We're looking for great realtors that are doing, at least 10 buy-side transactions a year to partner with. We're doing home buyer courses that are pushed out on social media where we, essentially community building. I would like to start doing that at the Denver space at some point, hopefully this year. So we're still talking membership there. But yeah, really just getting the word out, no pressure. Hey, come educate yourself, understand where you are. And, we do credit repair services as well. For people who come in and, their credit's wrecked, they've been through a bankruptcy. We'll give them the tools to put them on a program to get them where they want to go, right?
This episode is brought to you by Satoshi Pacioli, a full-service accounting and tax firm built for the Bitcoin economy. If you run a Bitcoin business, mine Bitcoin, or invest in it, you need advisors who actually understand how this industry works. Satoshi Pacioli handles bookkeeping, financial reporting, tax compliance, and strategic planning for Bitcoin-focused companies and individuals. They speak the language of Bitcoiners and help you stay compliant while building for the long term. To learn more or book a consultation, visit satoshipacioli.com.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your insight there, Greg, because there's two really interesting facets to what you just said, I think. The first being, if you have like a traditional, financial services company and you want to integrate Bitcoin into that and market to Bitcoiners, it is, a little nuance, and you kind of have to understand how they think, where to find them. I think you're spot on, podcasts and X. It's actually interesting. I think it was either TFTC or Bitcoin for Millennials. They were talking about how their audience actually skews like much older than what it had anticipated. And I think it was like 35 to 45 or something is like the cohort of their audience. And you always think of, Bitcoiners being like, Gen Z or millennial bros. And I guess that would be, millennial, but yeah, anyway, like going to where they're at and, meeting them, on the proper channels again. Yeah, I think in real life stuff is super important. The second, aspect, building on, what you and Jordan were talking about too, is you almost kind of feel this pressure as like, okay, I'm a mortgage company. Now I need to get into Bitcoin education. And there's a lot that comes with that. It's like, obviously you want to do it well. Find there's a lot of different rabbit holes that lead to different types of questions. And all of a sudden you're kind of, getting off track. And I'm trying to take the position more. Obviously, we're doing education. Jordan and I are focused on like our specific niche, and I do think that's important. So I've kind of changed my mind over it last couple of years. But there is also so much good Bitcoin education and content out there. I'd rather kind of just leverage that, and I can stay more in my lane and educate within specifically what I'm doing. So, do you guys have any intention of do you have go-tos and like listen to these podcasts, read these books? Or are you guys trying to organically come up with your own educational materials?
So I've created my own Canva website for internal use to start orange pilling my branch, right? I want to do a company webinar to really explain what I think is happening with the value of the dollar, asset prices, why Bitcoin's important, and what Bitcoin is, right? The basics on it, how it works, what it is, why it's secure and backed, and probably not going anywhere for a very long time. And if I can start there and slowly orange pill my group and get more people on board with these programs that we have, I think spreading the gospel is the way to go.
Yeah, I think especially with the younger cohort, it's extremely important as they, they look around and they're thinking, I can't afford a home. I'm going to have to rent. Potentially, if I am going to buy, I'm going to maybe buy in a worse part of town than I wish I could. And then that delays, things. If you have to buy a smaller house, that delays having kids. There's all these ripple effects on that. And so I'm curious, and it's probably even a role that Wyatt and I can make sure we continue to play with more of the Gen Z's folks that come into the space. But it's starting with that education, saving in Bitcoin, and then I think it has to just be, I don't think we can say it enough on this podcast, but it's extremely important and revolutionary, not to play on your all's name a little bit, but where you can save in Bitcoin, you can see your savings grow in value over time, and then you can not sell that in order to get into a house. I mean, I just think that if we had that, 2-3 years ago, like my wife and I bought our house, a couple of years back, we bought a condo about 5 years ago. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of things there that solves, and especially on the tax planning side for our clients, it's huge. So all that to say, I think the education for the younger generation, to say the steps are educate yourself about Bitcoin, get a job, save in Bitcoin, and then down the road, you can use that Bitcoin to qualify for a mortgage. And maybe even further down the road, you can push that into the collateral package. I just think that we're on a really cool path with all of this. So,
yeah, 100%. I mean, God, when was it? It was 2 days ago. I was at my daughter's taekwondo talking with some parents and mentioned that they had some friends who said they're not having children because they believe it's too expensive. And it just is heartbreaking, right? And at the same time, on the other side, you've got the boomer generation who have all of this wealth stored up, that will probably be leaving, a good amount of money to their heirs, right? They're the ones that are going in on Bitcoin, right? Because either they see it as, oh, it's just a gamble, I don't need it, it'll go to my kids if they need it and it succeeds, or I lose it, no big deal. But they have all this built up wealth. So we're really seeing that, yeah, you're right. It's the older people who are starting to get interested in Bitcoin as opposed to the younger. So I want to hit that from an educational standpoint on both sides, but the younger generation needs to really understand what's happening with our money and start finding meaningful ways to secure it, whether it be in Bitcoin, in property, or both, right? But this renter class is scary for the future for the younger generation. And I feel for them, because I got into Colorado right before the market completely popped, and I was probably 6 months out from being priced out of the state. So it's, it is kind of a timing thing, but again, that education is extremely important in setting the foundation for the future.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I don't know if they're strange bedfellows necessarily, but real estate and Bitcoin, at least scarce assets, obviously Bitcoin being more scarce, but, kind of my general, high level viewpoint of real estate is it's the most scarce asset the average Joe can get their hands on. And that's why I think we've seen this huge monetary premium on top of the utility, values of homes over the recent years. And it is crazy, if you look at, Zillow, probably in any city in the country, you go back, 10 years on what the home traded for versus what it traded for now. But I do think there's an interesting, sovereignty angle, like you mentioned at the beginning of the pod. You can't live in your Bitcoin. This helps you be a little bit more sovereign, owning, planting your flag. And ownership is, important. I do kind of worry about like this serf, renter class. I don't own like a 6-7 bedroom home like Jordan does. I rent. Because I think Bitcoin is better collateral, better asset. I'd rather own, a more scarce.
Wyatt's always calling me out.
All episode, I'm just trying to think. I'm hardly paying attention to the interview. It's like, how can I get a dig on Jordan here?
How's he short Bitcoin today?
Yeah. So I do, would encourage Bitcoiners to, kind of look into, diversifying. I kind of consider this, diversifying within Bitcoin. It's like you're utilizing or playing two assets off each other. And if I do have the sing the praises of real estate, I think that the arguably, besides living in it, the best use case for it is, collateral, and that opens you up to future, investment opportunities. And so it is like a nice marriage. I kind of anticipate, I'm curious on your thoughts on this, Greg, if we kind of look in the subsect of Bitcoin for financial services, I feel like real estate's going to embrace it faster than some of these other sub industries.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? We're capped on Bitcoin at 21 million. At the same time, it is very, very difficult to build more land. You can build more houses, but there's only a finite amount of land out there that you can own. And I guess the question becomes, do you think that the central banks and our government are going to continue to devalue the dollar, right? If the money printer goes on, look at assets. Assets are king, whether it be Bitcoin, real estate. Look at what's happening with gold and silver right now. It's incredible. And I don't see a scenario where that stops. So getting into, diversification, if you want to call it, equity and property, makes sense.
Yeah. Greg, we're coming up here on time, and I just want to probably end the show. You're a dad, you've got 2 daughters. The thing I hear from people, and I feel myself, is just this is such a hopeful community. You go into other parts of the world, the people who work in other industries and whatnot, and people are just down, and they're just not doing well, right? And you come into this community, maybe just speak on how you've seen, hope kind of across the board, at least from a monetary standpoint, of having more, freedom over not being debased and being able to have opportunities. And even for your daughters, I don't know how old your daughters are, but I feel like for young people, if I'm able to speak to someone who's young, I'm like, look, go where the energy is going. And I see all of the energy of like the human energy that's really positive. It's flowing in this direction. It's not going into crypto. It's going into Bitcoin. Maybe speak to your experience on how you've seen that play out in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, not so much with Bitcoin itself, but what I can describe is the hope and the pride of owning your own home, right? Like that is a milestone in one's life that is quite the achievement, and it brings hope and focus to, you know, continue building, right? And that's important, especially in this day and age when everything's so chaotic and uncertain, right?
Yeah, man. Well, this has been great. I think people should give us a handoff. Where can they find you on LinkedIn, Twitter? Where can they find, you know, the mortgage product? If you know, if they're an advisor or if they are a consumer who wants to take a look at this.
Yeah, so on X, I'm BTC Mortgage Guy. Our flyers out there, and you can DM me, or my email address is granz, RANZ, at revolutionmortgage.com. Hit me up. I'll send you all the details. We can connect and talk, and would love to, you know, set that baseline for you and get a plan together.
That's fantastic. No, thanks so much for coming on, Greg. I think this was an awesome rep, and people will be really interested in this. And I just want to give a huge tip of the cap to you and the Revolution team for building awesome products like this. I think it's going to help push, you know, our industry forward in the right way, and more people should do this.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wyatt. Thanks, Jordan.
All right. Thanks, Greg. All right, everyone, go check out Revolution Mortgage. If you are in the, you know, looking for a house, definitely hit them up. I guess unless you're in New York or Hawaii. And if you're in New York, you probably want to get out of there. I don't know about Hawaii. Hawaii seems nice. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. All right. Talk to y'all soon.
Thanks, guys.
We appreciate you joining us. If you want to help build the future of Bitcoin and financial services, hit subscribe, leave a review, sign up for a newsletter, and share with someone in your network who's integrating Bitcoin into their practice. The more professionals we reach, the stronger the ecosystem becomes, and our clients are better served. Stay sharp, stay sovereign, keep leading from the front.